Hello and welcome to this B attributes course. Today we're going to talk about brake lights. So brake lights is the attribute that asks, are the object's brake lights activated? And the choices to choose from are on, off, or can't tell. So before we go into making those selections on brake lights attribute, first we'll go into what brake lights actually are. So brake lights, what are brake lights? Brake lights are the red lights on the back of cars that turn on when a car is braking. So all of those orange circled lights on the back of these cars are the brake lights, and that's where you can always find the brake lights, on the back of the car. And how about when brake lights are not on? So the brake lights, this is what they look like when they are not on, when they're off. And this is where they are located. So brake lights in the brake lights attribute in B must be adjusted per frame. So here we have an example, frame 12 of the same car. The brake lights are on. You can clearly see the red glow on the taillights. And then in frame 13, we can see that the glow is gone, and so we would select off for frame 13. So when you can see activated brake lights on a vehicle, like these, you want to select on for the brake lights attribute. When deactivated brake lights can be seen on a car in camera view, like these, then you're going to want to select off for those frames. And here we have cars where the camera angle is not clear enough for us to be able to tell whether the brake lights are on or off. So perpendicular angles like this that we see from the camera view, and also clearly in the second on the SUV on the right, the brake lights are not visible, and so we want to put can't tell. So we want to mark can't tell if we can't view the brake lights due to the direction that the vehicle is facing. Another reason why we want to put can't tell on brake lights is if the brake lights are occluded in the camera view. So if we can't see the brake lights due to occlusion, due to other objects blocking the brake lights on the vehicles, then we're going to want to choose can't tell. No, some other reasons are if we don't get a good view because of blurriness or distance from the camera, and we can't clearly make out whether the brake lights are on or off, we just want to put can't tell. Um, can't tell. Same thing for these examples. These examples are of vehicles that are just a little too far away, where we can't clearly make out the brake lights, so we want to put can't tell. If we're not confident if the brake lights are on or off, select can't tell. So sometimes brake lights can be difficult to see because of glare, we can't tell whether the brake lights are on or off. We want to put can't tell. But if we do see even like we see a pretty dramatic change between frames despite the glare, then we're going to want to select off for when we can visibly see the change, um, and on for when we see it activate here. So like in the frame where we can see the active brakes, this one, then we'll put on like that. And then in the frames where we know that the brakes are not activated, and even though it may have been glary to begin with, we want to select off once we are able to determine that we're able to notice that change between frames. Another time when we want to put can't tell is here's a perpendicular view of this vehicle where we really can't get a good idea about whether the brake lights are on or off from that angle. But as we progress through the frame, um, and then we see that the brake lights have been on because the car is still stopped in the same position, we don't want to infer. We want to only base our attribute selections on what we're able to see in the camera view. So we know for sure that the car was braking or something, but it's based off of what you're able to see. So in the left image where we have a perpendicular view of the van, we don't know for sure whether its brake lights are on or off or not because it's hard to tell. But in the later frames where we can clearly see the back of the vehicle, we want to select on that frame. So you could color cuboids by the brake lights attribute. You can do so by clicking the L key to cycle through the cuboid color choices, or you can click the color palette next to the brake lights attribute. And what that does is colors the frames by the attribute choices. So there's the frame bar, and the green is for can't tell, purple's for off, orange is for on. So in all the frames where on the frame bar that are green, we've selected can't tell on the attribute on the as the attribute for the vehicle. Same thing with the purple. That means we've selected off, and for orange we've selected on. So when we see that the brake lights are off on a vehicle, that they're not activated, then, excuse me, then we want to select off. And what that will do is color the cuboid purple, and it'll also color the frame selector as purple on that frame. When we clearly can see that the brake lights on a vehicle are activated, then we want to select on. And what that will do is it will color the cuboid orange, and it'll also color the frame orange too. When we can't make out the brake lights because of occlusion or any other reason, we can't tell, we select can't tell. That's going to turn the cuboid green. It's also going to turn the frame green on the frame bar. So some critical errors with brake lights. If you see a vehicle's brake lights that are not activated, it's a critical mistake to choose that they're on. We clearly see that they're not on. And if on is selected, that's a critical mistake. So it's really important to be very careful. Coloring the cuboid by the attribute really helps in knowing for sure, doing your checks, making sure that the proper attribute is selected. So that's completely wrong. And it's a critical mistake. And that's correct. And the opposite is true. You know, we can clearly see the activated lights on this car, and if off is selected, that is a critical mistake. You can always tell looking at the frame bar what attribute is selected on the frame. We need to select on when we see activated brake lights. And another critical mistake is selecting off when we can't tell whether the brake lights are on or off. Choosing either on or off in this instance is a critical mistake. When we can't see the brake lights and we don't know whether they're on or off or not, we have to select can't tell. Okay. Another critical mistake would be selecting all the frames based off of a single frame. This is a critical mistake that could happen, but you want to avoid it because we need to adjust brake lights per frame, not just based off of one single frame. So remember, brake lights have to be adjusted per frame. You can always color the cuboids and color the frames by the brake lights attribute, which will help you be able to tell what frames are selected, or what attributes are selected on each frame. Thank you so much. Hi, so in this video, I'm going to show you how to set the brake lights on a car. All right, so right now I'm selecting the color by cuboid on brake lights. So basically color the cuboid by the brake lights attribute. And I can see that on all the frames, the brake lights is set to can't tell. So as I'm progressing through the frames, I begin to see that one of the brake lights peeks out from the right side as it's changing lanes, and or as the occlusion level changes, and so I'm able to clearly see the brake lights on the vehicle. So now I'm scrolling all the way up to a point where the brake lights activate. And then I'm going to use the frame selector tool to change all the previous frames to off on brake lights, starting from where the brake lights are can't tell. And then for the later frames, I'm checking the brake lights as they activate, and then I'm changing all the frames where there's active brake lights on there. Thanks.